Great. And then we have Neeraj.
Hey everyone, I'm Neeraj. I have been working in Geekend for nearly 4 years. I've been working mostly on React and React Native most of the times. Apart from that, I have some experience on AngularJS, Node, Laravel, Next.js, and other things. But mostly I've been focused on React and React Native, and hopefully I'll be talking about that here.
Yeah. We'll have some questions around React Native and React, and I'll start from that side, maybe for the first question, and then reverse it for the second question. And people can just agree to the previous speaker, but I would love to have like difference of opinion because that's what panel is all about. Fight, not physically, but yeah, with words. Great. So the first question is, what kind of tools are used for general debugging or performance debugging? Manshu, you want to take that?
Okay. Yeah. So I mostly use Chrome DevTools. I work on Chrome for development, and even for React, I don't use much of the React DevTools. I mostly work with like Chrome debugger, and for performance debugging, I use the Chrome profiler, the performance tab under Chrome DevTools. It gives you a very nice profiling of all the methods that are called and how much time they are taking up. So yeah, mostly that. Sometimes I use React DevTools for measuring the the re-renders, or like how much. Again, it's the same kind of data. How much a component is taking up. How much time it is taking up for render. But I think the same kind of data you also get on the Chrome profiler. So that's it. I mostly use Chrome profiler.
Okay. How about you, Mandy?
Yeah, even for React Native, I use Chrome DevTools. But I want to add something here. So Chrome debugger uses V8 JavaScript engine, and React Native uses JavaScript core engines, and both are different. And anytime your app misbehaves on Chrome, when you attach a debugger, if your app is like misbehaving, because when you're running your app in a debugger mode, it's running on the V8 engine, not on the JavaScript core engine. So anytime your app is like misbehaving, please disable the debugger and try running on the normal like JavaScript core or emulator or real device.
Is JavaScript core only on Android, or I think we
It's
have
both
different engines on different platforms, right?
No, for JavaScript core for iOS, it's like built-in OS, but in Android, it's like comes in the whole package.
APK file.
Yeah, APK file.
Are they different engines or the same?
No, they are the same engines, I guess.
Core and V8 or?
No, core and V8 are different. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure if we have core that is on both the platforms, or we have V8 on one of them and core on.
No, V8 is for browser.
For browser.
Only for React Native uses JavaScript core, and in new architecture that's also decoupled. Now we can use different engines. We can use V8. We can use Hermes.
Yeah, Hermes. Yeah, I've tried that once, but yeah. Anything else?
Just to finish what you were saying is that now we have Hermes out of the box on RM, so that's great. But in terms of performance for React Native, I have 3 devices. I have a Moto G5 S Plus. I have a Redmi 1S that I just physically run my app and test on, because that's like the source of truth, right? You have a really bottom tier 5,000 rupees mobile phone that you try out. I have an old iPhone 7 that I've staved, and I just like use those apps to like get a feel for how the user is experiencing the app. But yeah, the profiler and all of that is something they covered already.
Interesting. So React Native works pretty well on the old phones as well.
Yeah, like most of lightweight apps on Redmi 1S work like surprisingly fine. Like there's complaints about React Native performance. Yeah, if you have like a flat list with 1,000 elements, maybe to slow down. But like for most applications, you can't tell if it's not native.
That's the developer's problem, right? Like,
yeah.
flat list with thousands of elements.
Virtualized list model.
Great, Neeraj.
I just want to add to his point that the cheap Android phones are a great way to actually test if your app is breaking from performance issues. And as Himanshu mentioned, that we use Chrome profiler for a lot of performance testing. But when it comes to React Native, React DevTools is really helpful. It can get you the context of what might be re-rendering a lot of times. I know that that might be achievable doing a lot of logs, but when you go through React DevTools, you get an idea where you might have to focus on actually improving your performances, and most of the time that actually boils down to some re-renders or some unused props or unused states. So yeah, I will vouch for React DevTools, and for normal debugging, I prefer to use Firefox because of some few developer-friendly features. As you have two options to run your JavaScript code, either line by line like a interpreter, or you can write your whole code and then press command code to enter. And just not in the context of performance, but you can better inspect CSS grid and all those things on Firefox Developer Edition. So yeah,
Interesting.
that's my
Yeah, it's good to hear that you're using Firefox. Feels like you're working for an NGO.
Yes. And because Chromium-based browsers are now taking more and more places in the marketplace, and we have another JavaScript engine which is only on one browser. The rest of the market, if you just exclude Safari, is captured by Chromium. So this is always a good thing to have a competition in the market, both of them competing for performance, also for the standardization. And if, on my experience, if it works on Firefox, it will probably work on everywhere else because it's open source.
Is that a good thing? I'm not sure. People have this new thing like Safari is the new IE. I mean, I shouldn't say that publicly, but I've seen a lot of tweets around it.
Because that is the only closed-source browser which has a different engine now that Internet Explorer is gone. So probably developers have to think about Safari in a different way, and maybe they are developing for Chrome and Firefox altogether. And just like in the old days, we used to worry about IE separately. Maybe they are now worrying about Safari separately.
Yeah.
Just to add to what he said is, the problem with Microsoft pushing IE was that they wouldn't use standard APIs and they would just make their own thing and expect you to like follow that because they had the majority advantage. And that's sort of what Apple likes to do as well, like do their own thing, not follow standards, and that's just frustrating as a web developer.
I would like to add that Safari is way better than IE for a developer. Sorry, Internet Explorer was, and I still thank God every day that Internet Explorer.
Wait, I think that's a separate discussion. We'll get back to performance and React Native for now. Right?
Yeah, so I wonder how no one mentioned console log. So yeah, for me, like most of the things are already covered by everyone. So the only thing I want to mention, like most of the time when you are you are struggling with finding out why a bug is happening, your best friend is console log. Try writing console log after every line and like measuring the performance. Recently we did with native base yesterday. So yeah,
I think that goes for everything. Nothing can replace console log in any language.
I've seen like weird comments like console.log, यहाँ तक पहुँचा भाई.
So I would like to add, we also have very good methods like Rohit said, console.log. We have console.time.
Yes.
Yeah, I use that a lot.
Yeah.
And
Also console.group.
yeah.
Console.files. Group. Console.table, console.time. I would like you guys to be a bit louder because for the.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I had one question here. So, what do you use for network debugging for your React Native apps? I mean, this is also general debugging, right?
Yeah.
So, network debugging.
Network debugging. I have an answer, but yeah.
I don't have an answer.
I actually cannot recall the name of the app.
The name is Flipper.
So I have not been using Flipper, so
We also have like standalone application React Native Debugger, which we can like integrate with the Redux and Chrome DevTools, and we can have network debugging in that too.
And with the newer version of React Natives, the network debugging in device, although it's not very feature rich, but if you just want a basic network debugging, that's now more of a possibility than before 0.60.
Yeah, nice. I was expecting a lot of discussion around Flipper because that's like the go-to thing for debugging React Native applications, especially for the UI and also the renders. But yeah, great. Next question. when do you decide to add a state management library, and what is your go-to library and why? We can start with Rohit.
So I haven't worked on any production app or like project kind of thing. I'm mostly focused on research and development. So I don't think I'm the right person to ask this question.
Yeah,
So
Neeraj.
I would like to pass it.
So first of all, I'm a great fan of not selecting state management right at the go. If your project, your project might have a use case that you don't even need the state management at all. But if you do, I think I have done MobX and Redux both. Redux I have done more thoroughly, and I believe because that's mainly a standard now. Redux comes right to your mind when you're doing React, and that only argument I would put for Redux is the ease of starting up on the project, and it's kind of expected from everyone to have a basic understanding of Redux. The same thing you could not say about. I know MobX is pretty popular, but if you just go around and just have a lantern in your hand, you'll probably find a person with Redux knowledge earlier. So if your project has a timeline and you need to start early, then definitely Redux is the way to go. But when you don't have such deadlines and you need the best of your project, uh, I would definitely suggest going more towards researching which state management will actually suit your use case more. It's always about your use case, not what's the best.
I think that's the bottom line. That's a very nice
Yeah.
answer. Okay, great. Moving on.
I have two thoughts on what he mentioned is 100% like Redux has become sort of the pattern, but there's also like reducers and contexts and hooks that we forget that are super powerful, and that might just be like what you need because that is part of the framework. And on a different, and that just makes hiring talent really easy. It makes finding contributors really easy because you're using something that's popular. It might not be the best suited thing, but it might be beneficial to take that because you get more people to work with you. One thing that I also want to add is that we are seeing like a lot of new libraries by this one developer called Daishi. He's done like Jotai and Zustand and like Valdio, and there's so many things that they do really easily, really simply. So there's no like Redux boilerplate to like manage a state. So that's something that maybe we can talk about later.
I would like to add to the context and hooks. So if your data is not that much dynamic and you are dealing with limited set of data, or you can just have different set of context for different business logics, it might not be the best solution for majority of the use cases, but it might be the best solution for some of the use cases where you don't have like a dashboard where the data is updating and your app is rendering a lot of time. Although there are solutions to stop the re-rendering which are happening through context, but that's what I meant when you have a ease of starting up with Redux. You can theoretically achieve things with context, but that will be you writing everything by yourself. You might be having to write actions and you might be having to listen to them. Redux just gives you a fresh boilerplate to start with. And also, yeah, huge fan of context. Whatever can be done through context, I'm going for it.
You should say, I don't agree, and we'll grab some popcorn.
That makes sense, I think. For now,
Mandeep will say that now.
Yeah.
So whenever we have like smaller projects with like very less files, very less states, we can do it by local state management. Let's take an example. We have a larger e-commerce website. Now we have a product. Now when we add this product to the cart, so it will be added in the cart. Even we have to update the same product on different pages, like on the history page. There are many other pages like we have to update. So if the developer has in his mind, he has no scalability of the like what's happening. If something goes wrong, it's like very difficult to like debug. So in that cases, the Redux can come in handy.
Yeah,
That's-
makes sense.
yeah.
Himanshu?
I guess most of the things are covered, but I really like Zustand. I think you mentioned
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
right? So Zustand it seems like a very lightweight library, and it just makes sense just by like giving it one read. it has a very concise documentation and it's very clear. So I think I like that. I would like to try that myself, but I haven't really. Other than that, I try to avoid adding a state management library as much as I can. If it's a simple app, yes, I won't like to add a state management library.
Himanshu, you also built a state management library called Sync State.
Yeah, how could I miss that? So it's kind of like a use case where if your app is very real time and it needs to sync with like kind of a multiplayer scenario where multiple people are working on the same app and the data needs to be synced across multiple users. So it supports that very well. It's based on JSON patches. So basically you emit some patches on some path and then that gets propagated to all the users, like including the server where it's synced and it manages the state across all the users.
Interesting. Yeah. Great. The next question is on UI libraries. Which UI library do you use for your React and React Native app? We can start maybe from Ekansh at the center. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I thought I was in the center. I would just like have this advantage of not having to bring original thoughts. I haven't really worked with like either. I've heard good things about Tailwind and Chakra and things like that, but I haven't really used a UI library. I just like always.
The question is about React Native and React both. So yeah.
Interesting. I think I just usually when I'm working on a project, we always have like a very strict sort of design guideline. So I always just like start building from scratch and like start writing CSS because that's how I've grown up. Like I started with like Web 2.0, and so that's sort of my approach to like making things. It's just like, hey, I'll just make it. Like I'll just build it myself.
Okay. Great. Neeraj?
So on React Native, I have worked on. So I'll just explain the two use cases I have seen. One where we started with React Native paper, and we started developing our components on top of that. And paper actually gives you a lot of default styling. So maybe if you do not have a UI developer and you're just starting your app from scratch and just designing on the go, paper is great. But on another project, what we decided was, although we did not have a design library ourselves, but we had a folder called components, and we did not use anything other than either let's say if we have only one place where we are using the component, then probably we are designing it right from the React Native component. But most of the time, even for something like text or for something like a button, we would have our own component and we would manage that. And because the code review process around the components were stricter than around the screens, we would maintain the code quality as well. So it was kind of having our own design library. So yeah, that's one way to go as well. And we can never not mention NativeOS. NativeOS I haven't used personally, but I have gone through the code when if in any project it was required. And I believe now that the newer version is out, it's great. One should try that. And on React, Bootstrap is still a thing. And Tailwind, and I have been I have had a liking for material for a long time. And because it is present on a lot of platforms, you can just have a communication. Let's say you are working with an Android developer, you might share the same design principle with them. So material is great for that.
I just want to quickly add that Ant design is much better visually than Material UI because it feels so outdated using Material UI. Even the React thing built on top of Material UI is just very like convoluted to use. Like I don't like the API design at all. So just want to put that out there.
Makes sense. Yeah. Who else? Who's
Yeah.
left?
So even I'm a big fan of Material. Even they have released a new version. I love the documentation of the new version.
Himanshu?
before native base, I liked Chakra UI. Now that we have native base for universal apps, I'm probably going to use that. Other than that, yeah, I really like Tailwind for the web apps, like any web apps, right?
Someone made like a wrapper for Tailwind on React Native as well, so like, that's cool.
Should I say? Yeah, so it really depends on the use case. So, like if you want customizability and like as Neeraj mentioned, like if your use case is only like material, the design is already the material design. So you shouldn't be wondering here and there and straight away choose material UI. But if you have a proper design team and like you can design yourself, then maybe a better customizable library would be your choice, like native base and for web chakra and other. I think Tailwind is there.
Now with the universal component, native base
Yeah,
provides more use case
yeah.
for itself, right?
Right, makes sense. I wouldn't say anything beyond that. Yeah, great. So I'm going to merge few questions that sharing code between web and have you done it? How successful was it? And what's your feedback? Like, should we do it? Yeah, we can start with Himanshu.
Yeah, so there were a few projects that we required to share some code between web and mobile apps. I think sharing business logic is still like fine. You can do it with not that much of difficulty. Obviously, UI components, that's a problem. That's what we were solving with native base. Other than that, I think yes, as Rohit said in his talk, the final thing that was left was navigation. That was always a challenge to share that part. But I guess Solito is going to solve that, so that's a really good thing. But yeah, I'm all for sharing code between platforms as much as you can. But then it should be like not forced and a lot of abstractions just for sharing, like and introducing complexity at that layer. But yeah, as much as you can, I would like to go for it.
Okay. Andeep?
Like you said, you can like if you are like sharing the code between web and mobile. Let's take example with React and React Native. So we can share all the business logic, you hooks and all. Even we can share if we have the Redux implement, we can totally share it. Only like we have to like write the UI from scratch.
But
So
there are options, right? Like
yeah, now there are options.
React Native Web.
Yeah, React Native app. Yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to preface that by that, but I think React Native Web is fantastic. Like, it just works out of the box. It's like surprisingly well made. Twitter was using it for like the longest time, and they've been very successful with it. But we're using in this product called App Builder, and we're reusing almost everything. Like even on the UI side, we're using like the buttons. We're reusing like sort of the icons and all of that across web, mobile, and desktop. And it's all using React Native Web. For navigation, we're using React Navigation. So we're just importing different files from different libraries. So using Webpack to handle all of that. There are certain cases where we have to do like a specific component. For example, like a picker is different on phones and it's different on web. It's just the way web was made. So we do this thing where we use Webpack to do .native .something, and then that gets packaged to your native land, and the simple component goes there. And I think that's like a very nice way to not force using one piece of code everywhere, like he mentioned. But it also sort of puts you in the position where that should be your first approach to try to solve it. If not, then you can like resort to having different files for the same component.
Interesting.
But we share the entire code base for like it's just one repo, everything shared across the three platforms.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of companies are doing that. Something like Showtime, that's a Web3 company that's doing like one single code base. Then WeCake for
Nando's.
Yeah, so they are doing a lot of great things. But Uber has been doing it for quite a while. React Native Web, they were the first ones, and they're using it on all their mobile web. So,
I think Twitter is also doing.
yeah, Twitter also uses React Native Web a lot.
So yeah, the thing which you mentioned about React Native Web, I think you remember we had a discussion about that when we were trying to develop a mono repo, But on that time, React Native Web was fairly new, and we had some challenges around that. And I still remember Twitter had shifted to React Native Web long back then. Now I'm really excited by the Solimo talk because the navigation is solved, and React Native Web and the implementation on native web have come leaps and bounds. I think it has been 3 years since we tried that, and we ended up sharing our business code anyway through our mobile application and the web application. We created a npm package, a private npm package, and almost every API call, almost every method to call that API call or to sanitize the output or the input, we had shifted that to the npm package. But that was not our original intention. We always wanted to create a mono repo that time, but I didn't think that was possible then. And the one example of success of React Native Web you can see is if you have been using Facebook for a long time, you go to facebook.com, you see the entirely new UI, and by your naked eye, if you have done any sort of development on React Native Web, you can just understand that this is a React Native Web website, and they have completely rehauled it. Their website is their whole design is completely changed, and there are more spaces. And because of React Native, I think they have managed to also unify the development between mobile and website. Before going to React Native Web, they had a different website for mobile and different website for laptop or for desktop. Now you can just resize and you'll see everything same on your mobile app and on the desktop. And also now if you see their watch section and everything, you see not only the visual elements are shared, also the bugs are shared. So definitely React Native Web is doing good there. Yeah, that's my point.
Right.
Yeah, if you have asked me this question a year ago or 5 years ago, I would have said I would have hesitated a lot. But like seeing how React Native Web has improved, and like I was talking to I think Lakshit regarding this topic. So we also shared that thought. Like previously, React Native Web was missing a lot of components from native. And now it's been improving, and it's been a great work from I think Nicholas. Seeing that, I think I love how React Native code looks and feels, and how I love coding in that, and having that experience and having that same experience for creating my web apps and having a same code base and not writing a separate file altogether for creating the same thing on web. That's a huge advantage for me. So I support it like 200%.
I have one instance to add that I experienced the other day. I was at a hackathon, just being there interacting with the students, and this one guy comes up to me and he's like, "I'm using React Native on, and how do I like do this on web?" And I'm like, "You're using React Native on web? Like, aren't you using React?" They're like, "No, I just use Expo." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that makes so much sense, right? You just start with an Expo project, and web is like a default target."
Yeah.
I think that's just helped R&W go to like this sort of maturity. So I just wanted to bring that up. It was really mind blowing to me that you're using React Native on web.
Yeah, I was speaking.
Who does that?
Yeah, like Evan at one point, and they are like going full blown on navigation and all those things. Like, sorry, it was one
For sure.
example, but Expo itself, they are
Expo is
trying to
doing
build
a lot of-
something like Next.js. So
100%.
good stuff there. And I think React Native Web, when we're talking about, there's someone who contributed to React Native Web here. Okay. That's Meenu. She contributed to the React Native Web source code. So yeah. Great. One last question. We'll close this session. Your final take on the future of React Native and React both. We'll start from. So this is not on the list, but yeah, maybe we can start with Himanshu. Future of React Native and React.
I think there have been a lot of improvements in React and React Native over the years. We are seeing adoption like React. In React, we already have this new architecture available, and React Native, as Mandeep very well explained in his talk. So these are the improvements that people have been waiting for, and they are getting delivered, I would say. So we are moving towards like I would say it's a good direction to move towards. And I think all the that's again my personal opinion. I like React the best between all the frameworks that we have right now. Uh, I have interest in other frameworks too, but I'm mostly comfortable in React, so I guess.
Do you see
that's-
something else picking up lately?
Um, I don't know, but recently we've been hearing about Svelte a lot, and they also have this Svelte kit that's, you can say, a competitor of Next.js. So that's a good thing, but I'm not seeing a lot of production apps with that yet.
Yeah.
I would like to try it out. It seems very interesting, but I don't know if I'm ready to use it in a production project.
How about Flutter and Web, Flutter Web?
Flutter Web is not really matured yet. Flutter Web uses a lot of canvas to render their elements. So it affects a lot of things like accessibility and SEO, those things.
Yeah.
So I guess it has a long way to go.
So React and React Native right now is the best choice according to you.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I will talk about React Native. So we have the new architecture and we have this JSI which is completely written in C++, and we know the power of C++. So because this is written in C++, React Native will be compatible with the watches we're building for also for TV. I think we will sooner get even Windows and Linux application by React Native. We can guess the future.
How about you?
You talked about frameworks that are the sort of like a meta framework built on top of React. So there's Next, which is super popular. I think I'm really bullish on Remix as well. It's so fun to use. It's just you're writing backend code without realizing you're writing backend code. It's just a really fun experience. I think Remix is great. I like Svelte a lot, but I just haven't seen anyone use it in production. So it just makes me believe that it's not as good as I think it is. But other than that, I think personally, React just makes sense. But we might see a lot of these meta frameworks coming up built on top of React for particular things. I think Shopify did their own framework built on top, which is like React, but for building Shopify things. So I think React is becoming the standard which a lot of people are working on, and that ties into sort of how they're bringing suspense and all of those cool things. Since React 17 was really boring, there was nothing new. React 18 sort of is reimagining sort of how you interact and improving the user feedback when you click a button and the JS thread isn't blocked or whatever. Talking about React Native, I think JSI is going to change the game. It's going to just be a whole leap ahead of other things. I hate Flutter Web with a passion because it just doesn't make sense to me how you can render everything a canvas. Because the whole idea for web was you have these standard components which the browser understands and you use them. It just goes back on that logic. So that's that. And I think the only challenge for React Native would be to get libraries to adopt JSI and sort of turbo modules and all of that, because there's a lot of heavy lifting required for maintainers to navigate through the new architecture. Because even with Hermes, we saw a lot of time for the community to take on these changes. But we've seen a lot of core maintainers for React Native actually coming forward to help out big libraries to navigate the whole new sea of opportunities.
Yeah. I have a follow-up point on Flutter Web. Flutter Web, I think it's not up to the mark, obviously, but it does use a lot of low-level HTML, syntactic correct elements, and it only goes back to the places where the API is a mismatch. Then it uses Canvas. So for most of the things, it does use the standard HTML.
I think that I was wrong about I've read this about a few years ago. Maybe it's gotten much better in that time. But I just I couldn't get behind the philosophy of using that in a production thing. If I was using that, I would push it out to the public. I was this isn't ready yet.
Okay.
That's what I felt.
Makes sense, yeah.
I'll speak about React Native first.
Mhm.
So, I'll speak about React Native first. The first thing which, if you ever have a chance to work on Flutter, first thing which comes to mind is on Flutter you are rendering everything on a canvas, and on React Native is actually giving you native elements, which your JavaScript bundler, which your JavaScript process is running, it's calling those native elements and actually using the methods on those. But one thing which always existed in React Native was the bridging and the overload on that, and the discussion never got away. And I think that's a spot in the moonlight which React Native had. Really excited of what JSI actually brings to us. And any of us who have done React Native will know that there is a limitation on performance. We cannot really go beyond our definite FPS. I don't think we really did 60 FPS smoothly, but
Is or was? Like
was.
Was.
Yeah.
New
So
architecture, that's not. Is it available for like by default?
It's like in experimental.
Yeah, it's a flag that you
Flag
should
that-
set. Yeah.
You need to enable
It's
that.
behind a flag.
Hooks was experimental once.
Yeah.
So really good hopes for JSI to come back. And Flutter Web doesn't really compare to React for now. I say React has become almost a synonym of a JS web development currently. So I'll tell my personal experience. I have two teams I'm working with. One is of Angular and one is of React. I would never hear a React developer say that on Angular it can be done this way, and on React we have to face some problems. There are some use cases. There are a couple of use cases where Angular it is really easy, and React you have to write your own code. And I think that comes naturally because it's a library, not a framework, and you have to use a lot of things to achieve your use case. And on Angular, you actually come up with a lot of pre-existing solutions, and you can do that from the get-go. But still, I hear that every day that React has this flexibility, and you can pass anything, you can spread your props, you can do a lot of things, which I would speak for Angular that it does not actually provide you that. And I know that 75% of the web is WordPress, but I would say JS web development is becoming more and more a synonym of React. And even when people are working on other frameworks, they have this thing in mind that this is done this way in React, although they have never worked on React. So yeah, I don't think React has any problem in the future, and I'd say it will be improving more and more. React Native still has more competition with Flutter on the market, and I think if JSI does good, then it becomes a lot harder for Flutter to actually then compete with React Native. Although I would say they both are two different things, and we should not be comparing those. And they actually, the places where you would choose Flutter, there are places where it is hard to choose React Native for your applications.
Makes total sense. Yeah. Good.
Don't want this conversation to end. I strongly agree with Ekansh and Neeraj, and they summed it really well. I just want to share how I started working on native base. So I haven't worked with React Native ever before working on directly on native base, and just knew React. And the beauty of React and React Native is the ease, you can with the ease that you can adopt between both the technologies and the framework. So yeah, that's the point I want to add.
Okay.
But yes.
I think that's it. Any more points? Yeah.
Just want to add, JavaScript everywhere is just such a beautiful concept that I don't have to learn Dart to build apps. I just know JavaScript. It's such a blessing. It's such a blessing. So it's
The saying goes, anything that can be built using JavaScript must be built using JavaScript. Right. Okay. And on that note, thank you so much, all of you. And